Welcome to Loup TV. I'm Gene along with Doug for Thursday, February 17th. Our three topics today are Amazon and Visa find a way forward. Next is the Ford Mach-E ranked top EV from Consumer Reports. And third is the continuing dynamic between Tesla, Elon Musk, and regulators. So we'll go to the top here. May not seem like a big story, but it really caught our attention here is some backstory is that back in November in the UK, Amazon stopped accepting Visa as a payment mechanism. Today, they because of some of the fees that Visa was charging, and today they announced a partnership, some sort of a global settlement, and they're going to work together on products and presumably kind of tweak some fees, and they found their way forward. So if you're in the UK, you can use your Visa again on Amazon. And I wanted to start with just the power dynamics here. Who started this and kind of how it played out here? Does anything come top of mind?
In some ways, it actually reminds me of what's been going on with Apple and Facebook, where we've got these two massive companies, world-defining companies that come to a head, and something has to give one way or the other, and one company ultimately is exerting some power over the other. And I think for Amazon, what we saw was they said in the UK, so I think you could probably think of that, or at least I would think of that as almost like a test market where they're not doing too much damage by saying we're not going to take Visa cards anymore. We think the fees are too high. And then having this dispute go on with Visa for a couple months now, and ultimately getting this global settlement, to your point, that if you read between the lines, I mean, no details on the settlement came out, but you'd have to believe that they got a more favorable rate or a more favorable deal with Visa as it came to a head here. And the takeaway,
by the way,
is
that favorable deal presumably would be applied globally.
It sounds like it, because the statement was that it was a global arrangement with Amazon. So I would think it affects everything, including the U.S., which is Amazon's biggest market. But the thing that I really that caught my attention was just, I think we're going to be seeing more and more of this, where you think about how big some of the top 10, top 20 companies in the S&P 500 are. Most of them now are technology companies. And they're all in some ways kind of fighting for the same consumer dollars. They're stepping on each other's toes in a lot of ways. And just like we saw with Apple and Facebook, and now with Amazon and Visa, I think you're going to see more conflict between the big players on some of these new initiatives. Video gaming to me is maybe one of the big areas that it's early, and Microsoft has a big lead, but I think some of the other players want to get in there, and that could be the next area of conflict.
In terms of just who carries the most weight in these conflicts, if you would take the retail example and rewind it as far back, think of a small mom and pop retailer. They cannot go to Visa and say, we want better terms. And then you kind of scale up to Amazon, and they have enough gravity to be asking for this. And I'm curious, when you think about that power dynamic, let's just look at this particular announcement here. Which one would you say has the upper hand, if any?
Well, scale, I think, is really hard to beat in most cases. And the thing about the internet is that it sort of takes everything that used to be local, to your point about the mom and pop, and it gives it this massive scale because it becomes a winner take all market. And so to me, I think whoever has the greatest scale, which is probably defined as the tightest relationship directly with the consumer, is how I would think about it across these companies. So Apple owns the consumer through the phone, and the consumer is accessing Facebook through that phone. I would say Apple has the upper hand in that case. In the case of Amazon, they have the consumer who wants to spend money on the products that Amazon or their third parties offer. And then Visa is the conduit for the payment there. And so in that case, I would give the upper hand to Amazon too. But as a rule of thumb, I think that's probably the right way to think about it, is who has, a more strong touch point with that consumer.
Isn't a payment mechanism just ultimately a commodity?
Well, I don't think it is. It's the networks that I think that Visa and MasterCard have built that are so impregnable, that are not a commodity. It's funny, like money in and of itself, I would argue and agree, is a commodity, but it's exchanging that money efficiently is not a commodity. And really, financial transactions always come down to kind of a network dynamic where if you can create a network where you're able to match sellers and payers between the network, that is hard to break because
Mm-hmm.
it takes a lot of infrastructure to do that. And think about how widely accepted your Visa card or your MasterCard is. It's that network dynamic that's really not the commodity.
Mm-hmm. But between Visa, MasterCard, presumably maybe Apple Card, American Express, you're kind of, as a consumer standpoint, you're largely indifferent. I mean, these are just all ways to move your money around.
Yeah, we're seeing, I think, some innovation that may, to your point, challenge, and I think some people are thinking it could challenge some of these card networks where, an Apple Card, for example, I believe runs on MasterCard's payment rails, if I remember correctly. So they actually do leverage the MasterCard network. It may be Visa. I'm pretty sure it's MasterCard, though. Some of these alternatives, though, you think about like a buy now, pay later concept where a consumer could actually take their bank account and they can directly, through a company like Affirm or Afterpay, which was purchased by Block, one of our portfolio companies, they can pay directly to that middle conduit. So it could be Afterpay, and then Afterpay will pay that merchant. And so there are some things that are starting to emerge that are potentially disruptive to this traditional payments network, but it's still super early and probably
Mm-hmm.
too early to say that it will disrupt, your Visa card.
I'm sure Amazon was holding whatever future that may be, that negative outcome over Visa's head. It will be a developing topic. It doesn't seem to catch all the flash of the typical topics that we discuss, but it was really important on the payment side. We're going to shift to our next topic, which is all about Flash, is Consumer Reports picked for their top EV for 2022. Drum roll, please, the Ford Mach-E. I was not surprised to see this, given I've always thought of the Mach-E as the best competitor to Tesla. And just want to mark this point is, Doug, you've talked about greater competition. We have seen it embodied here. We have gone and looked at the different specs. If you're curious, they have about the same, generally the same price and the same range, the base range. The Mach-E is a little bit more expensive with a little less range, but it's splitting hairs at a certain level. But definitely a win for Mach-E. And I would think that there is probably some context, I think, to that announcement that is relevant here too, as Consumer Reports does have this safety aspect to them. They have needled away at their FSD beta, or not the FSD beta, but the autopilot in the past, and have given the top autopilot award to Super Cruise, I think, GM Super Cruise in the past.
In the past, they did. That's right.
So I think it is. Let's let the record stand clear here. This is a win for Ford. It is a loss for Tesla, but I think the loss should be taken into context with kind of Consumer Reports and some of what their biases are. More competition is coming. I believe that. I think Tesla is going to stand up to that. And I'm going to give you last word on this, Doug.
I mean, I think that's the takeaway, is that more competition is coming. I think this is maybe just a small proof point that traditional auto can build a decent EV. And ultimately, I mean, you almost said it a minute ago that, the market's ultimately going to decide. I think that that's true here. I mean, Ford, the award, that's great, but they need people to buy the cars at the end of the day. I mean, that's really what matters, not awards. And so we'll see how many Mach-E's they sell. We'll see how many Lightnings they sell. And, really this will be decided more, I think, the magnitude of the competition. That's what makes this so
fun.
The
all the stuff we talk about, we can look back. These archives will be good fodder for us in the future. Right. Is it all right if we jump to the final topic here, which is related to Tesla again here? Musk taking some shots at NHTSA, taking some shots at SEC for not distributing his fine, $40 million fine, back to the people that were harmed by his infamous, was it 310 tweet? And curious, I mean, from the highest level, it just feels like deja vu here. We keep talking about this kind of greater tension between what Musk is doing and Tesla's doing with regulators, and would just be curious, where do you see this ultimately going?
It's hard. I mean, I first of all, don't see it ending anytime soon. And there's, I think, I think we've talked about this some, certainly internally, and I don't know if we've done it on Loup TV yet, but Elon has this dynamic where I think he's called himself like, the king of trolls or something like that. Like, he's very good, number one, first and foremost, at being bombastic and kind of being above the law. I think you could say that would be fair. He's criticized the government several times. And I think that that's actually part of like the brand, the personal brand that he has created. And I remember reading, back before Elon was really Elon, like when he was just sort of starting to emerge, there were these articles that like compared him to the Marvel version of Tony Stark, this kind of badass who, would go and buck heads with the government. And I think he's really taking that to heart. Like, I think he really doesn't feel like the government should have any say over what he does. And
so do you think he does it for show, or he like on principle?
both. I think it's both. I think he really believes it, but I also think he realizes, I mean, he's super intelligent. He understands that this is good marketing for him. We've talked about how Tesla doesn't need to market. It's because Elon is a marketing genius just for himself, and he is Tesla.
I'm going to get the final word on this. That I remember meeting with someone a couple of years ago that worked at SpaceX, and they're working on some project that was related to materials and how they change, the temperature changes as you get up in the atmosphere. It was well beyond what I have ever understood. Glad that there are smart people working on this, and asked him what his interactions with Elon, and he said, I do have interactions with him, and how those go. And he said, I'm always on the edge of my seat because he comes in here and he can go toe to toe with me. And I thought that really stuck out. We're not debating his intelligence quotient here, but I think that is true. He is playing three-dimensional chess, and it's fun to watch it in motion here. That's going to be a gift that's going to keep giving. So is Loup TV. We'll be back at this on I think our week ahead. It'll be our next episode. But on behalf of Doug and Gene and Loup TV, bye for now.